The rain poured relentlessly over the streets of downtown Atlanta, turning the asphalt into a slick, reflective canvas of neon signs and headlights. The city was alive, but tonight it felt different, heavier, charged with a tension that hung in the air like a storm waiting to strike. Marcus Reed, 32, walked calmly under his umbrella, his coat soaked but his steps measured. He had just left a late-night meeting for an ongoing federal investigation, completely unaware that his life was about to intersect with an old, dangerous bias. As Marcus approached the corner of Pine and 7th, a patrol car slid to a stop beside him. Two officers stepped out, flashlights slicing through the darkness. Both men were in uniform, hands brushing against their holsters, their eyes cold and calculating. One was tall and muscular, the other shorter but sharp-eyed, both wearing expressions of authority fueled by years of unchecked power. "Hey, stop right there," one barked, his voice echoing over the rain. Marcus stopped immediately, umbrella held tight, calm and composed. "Excuse me," he asked. His tone was steady, controlled, but there was an edge beneath it, a quiet warning. "You match a description," the taller officer said, stepping closer. "We need to ask you some questions." Marcus's eyes narrowed and his voice remained even. "A description of what? I think you're mistaken." The shorter officer let out a scoff, his lips curling in a slight sneer. "Don't play dumb, you know why we stopped you. People like you stick out in this neighborhood. Now step aside." The words cut Marcus, not because they questioned him, but because of the underlying venom in their tone. Their assumption wasn't based on evidence, it was based on his skin. The fact that he was black made him a suspect before he even spoke. "Am I being detained?" Marcus asked, his voice calm but carrying authority. He stood his ground, letting the rain plaster his hair to his forehead, letting the city witness the confrontation. "Not yet," the tall officer replied, but the hesitation in his tone betrayed his uncertainty. "Just cooperate." Marcus raised a hand slightly, a gesture of peace and defiance at the same time. "I will cooperate, but I cannot allow you to harass me simply because of my appearance. I've done nothing wrong. Please tell me exactly why I am being stopped." The taller officer's jaw tightened. "You fit the description of a man involved in a robbery earlier tonight. Now move." Marcus let out a slow breath, deliberately. Every eye on the street was now on him. A small crowd had begun to gather, umbrellas bobbing as people whispered among themselves. Some were recording on their phones, sensing a confrontation that could go horribly wrong. "I assure you, you've got the wrong man," Marcus said firmly, keeping his tone steady, controlled. "I am not the person you are looking for." The officers exchanged a glance, tension visible in the slight twitch of the shorter officer's hands near his belt. They were used to compliance, to the fear that came with being questioned, especially from young black men walking home at night. But Marcus was different. His composure radiated authority, an invisible shield forged by experience and years of training. "You're not leaving," the tall officer said, stepping closer, his voice rising with impatience. "We're taking you in." Marcus's eyes scanned them calmly. He didn't flinch. Instead, he slowly reached into his back pocket, deliberately, methodically, ensuring every movement was visible to everyone around. The officers tensed, ready to act, their hands hovering near their holsters. "Watch," Marcus said, his voice low but steady, carrying that same quiet authority that made people listen without question. He pulled out a leather badge wallet and flipped it open. The gold lettering gleamed even under the dim streetlights. "Federal Bureau of Investigation." The air shifted immediately. The officers froze, disbelief and sudden embarrassment overtaking their prior confidence. They had been ready to use force, ready to escalate, and now everything was gone in an instant. The shorter officer's mouth opened and closed like a fish, while the taller one's hand slowly dropped from his holster. Marcus didn't need to say another word. The badge carried all the authority, all the power, all the truth they had ignored in their assumptions. You didn't," the tall officer started, then stopped. The words stuck in his throat. Marcus closed the badge wallet with deliberate calm and met their eyes. "Gentlemen," he said, voice firm, "just because I am black doesn't mean I am guilty. Just because I appear a certain way doesn't mean you can act without consequence. Respect is due, even when it is inconvenient." The realization hit hard. They had tried to detain a federal agent, a black federal agent. Their assumptions, fueled by bias, had nearly turned a routine stop into a tragedy. Marcus stepped back, letting the rain soak his coat, letting the silence settle. "You are free to leave me alone now, and perhaps reflect on the power you wield carelessly." The officers muttered apologies, but Marcus knew they would remember this night long after the rain washed away the evidence of their error. As he started walking away, the city seemed to close in around him. But Marcus's attention shifted to something else. A shadow, moving subtly across the street, a figure partially hidden beneath a hooded coat. The figure paused as if studying him. Their eyes caught the reflection of a streetlight for a brief moment, then vanished into the night. Marcus's pulse quickened, not with fear but with awareness. He had survived the encounter with the officers, but now something else was at play. Someone had noticed him tonight. Someone who didn't act impulsively, someone who might follow, not because of the badge, but because of who he was. He ducked into a nearby coffee shop, letting the warmth of the interior chase away the cold rain. He ordered a black coffee and sat near the window, letting his gaze scan the street. Every passerby, every shadow, every reflection seemed amplified. He replayed the encounter in his mind, analyzing the tension, the moment the badge shifted everything, and the visible regret on the officers' faces. But the figure outside still haunted his awareness. Whoever it was, they had not moved tonight, but Marcus knew instinctively that this was far from over. The city, soaked in rain, seemed to whisper secrets, some that were dangerous, some that were deadly. He finished his coffee and stepped outside, keeping to the shadows, umbrella low. The observer was gone, vanished as if they had never been there. But Marcus could feel their presence lingering, a warning that tonight was only the beginning. As he disappeared into the night, the echoes of the officers' earlier aggression and the sting of racial assumptions lingered. Marcus's mind was already working, anticipating the next move, aware that his life had intersected with more than just the officers. The stakes were higher than ever. And across the street, hidden beneath a flickering streetlight, the observer reappeared, leaning casually against a lamppost, their eyes tracking Marcus's every step. They recognized him. They knew who he was, and they had plans that would make tonight's encounter look small in comparison. The rain didn't let up. The city was alive, and the tension that had started with assumptions and bias was only growing. Marcus Reed, black, determined, and armed with knowledge, had survived this storm. But outside, unseen, another storm was brewing. Marcus Reed had survived the encounter with the officers, but the adrenaline that had carried him through the confrontation refused to fade. The streets of Atlanta were slick, reflecting neon signs and headlights like fractured mirrors. The rain had slowed, but the damp chill clung to his coat, seeping through to his skin. He walked with measured steps, his mind racing faster than his feet. The badge had changed everything. In an instant, men who had been poised to escalate a routine stop into potential violence were rendered powerless by one simple fact: Marcus was FBI. But the encounter had left a residue of unease, one he could not ignore. Somewhere in the darkness, someone had been watching, studying his every move. The sense of being observed prickled at the back of his neck. As he turned onto a quieter side street, his eyes flicked to the shadows. Every doorway, every alley seemed to hold movement. He ducked under the awning of a closed diner and glanced around. The street was mostly empty now, save for the occasional pedestrian with an umbrella or a car rushing through puddles. Yet, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. He activated the secure line on his phone, a special device the FBI provided for agents in the field. His fingers moved deftly, entering a code that allowed him to send an encrypted alert to headquarters. Within moments, he received a reply, "Copy that. Backup is ready to mobilize if needed. Stay safe, Reed." He exhaled slowly, reassured that at least some measure of support was nearby. But reassurance did little to quell the tension that had settled deep in his chest. He knew the officers had acted recklessly, and he also knew that in Atlanta, bias wasn't a stranger. Racism wasn't just a social issue. It was a weapon some wielded freely, unchecked. Marcus continued walking, his mind analyzing every detail of the encounter. The officers had approached him aggressively, their assumptions shaped by nothing more than the color of his skin. His badge had given him authority, but it hadn't erased the instinctive prejudice he saw in their eyes. That instinct could escalate, and it often did. As he reached the corner of 9th and Peachtree, he noticed movement, a figure slipping between two parked cars. Marcus slowed, observing carefully. The figure was male, tall, with a hood pulled low over his face. He lingered just beyond the reach of streetlights, a shadow among shadows. Marcus's hand instinctively brushed his coat pocket, feeling the badge wallet he had stashed away. He stopped in the middle of the street, letting the rain fall steadily on his shoulders. "I know you're there," he said calmly, though his voice carried an edge of warning. "I'm not looking for trouble, but I'm not afraid of it either." The figure hesitated, then stepped forward, revealing a glint of something metallic in his hand. A phone, likely recording. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Whoever this was, they had been watching the encounter with the officers, waiting, studying him. But why? "Reed," a voice called from the shadows. It was low, controlled, with a slight accent he couldn't place immediately. "You can't always trust the badge." Marcus's pulse quickened. "Who are you?" he asked, keeping his tone even. "And why are you following me?" The figure paused, as if considering whether to respond. "Let's just say I've been tracking movements in this city for a long time, and tonight I saw something interesting." Marcus's instincts screamed caution. He had faced dangerous criminals, but this was different. This was someone operating in the gray area, neither law enforcement nor entirely criminal, yet clearly informed and aware of his identity. "I'm not here to harm you," the figure continued, stepping closer, though still keeping a safe distance. "But you need to understand that not everyone sees the badge as a shield. Some see it as a target, some see you as an opportunity." Marcus studied him carefully. "Then I'll be cautious, but you need to leave now, or I'll assume the worst." The figure smiled faintly. "Fair enough. But remember, Reed, the city isn't as safe as you think. Those officers tonight, they're just the tip of the iceberg. You might have karma on your side, but there are others who won't hesitate." Before Marcus could respond, the figure turned and melted into the shadows, leaving only the sound of rain and the distant hum of traffic behind. Marcus took a deep breath, forcing his mind to focus. He had survived the officers, but now he had an unknown observer, and possibly an adversary, tracking him. He continued toward his car, parked 2 blocks away. Every reflection in a puddle, every ripple of the rain on the asphalt seemed magnified. When he reached his vehicle, he paused, scanning the street once more. No one was there. Yet the sense of being watched remained, a silent weight pressing on his shoulders. Driving home, Marcus replayed the night in his mind. The officers' assumptions, their aggression, the almost inevitable escalation, all fueled by one factor, the color of his skin. He had been stopped not because of evidence, not because of suspicion, but because he was black. And while the badge had saved him this time, he knew others weren't always so lucky. Arriving at his apartment, he parked under the dim light of the building's canopy. The rain had tapered into a drizzle, but the air remained heavy, thick with anticipation. Marcus stepped inside, shaking off his coat, dripping water across the tiled floor. He poured a glass of water and leaned against the kitchen counter, reflecting on the events. His phone buzzed with alerts, Local news updates about the officers, social media chatter from witnesses, and snippets of video captured by bystanders. One clip showed the officers approaching him, their hands near their holsters, their expressions hard with authority. Another showed Marcus calmly pulling out the badge, the instant shift on their faces, the stunned silence of the crowd. He watched the footage with a mix of satisfaction and concern. Satisfaction because justice, however small, had been served. Concern because the attention he had drawn tonight might have consequences. Someone had taken note of his actions. Someone who didn't fear the badge. Later that night, Marcus sat at his desk, files spread out before him. He had returned to his work, but the unease persisted. He opened a secure channel and began reviewing reports on recent hate crimes and racially motivated incidents. The officers tonight were an example, but they weren't the only ones. Hours passed. The city outside grew quiet, the rain reduced to a faint mist. Marcus leaned back in his chair, exhausted, but he couldn't sleep. The memory of the figure in the shadows lingered in his mind. Why had they approached him? Why had they warned him? Suddenly, a soft chime from his phone broke the silence. An unknown number. No caller ID. Marcus hesitated before answering. "Marcus Reed," a voice said, familiar yet impossible to place, smooth and deliberate. "You handled tonight well, but there are eyes everywhere and some of them don't care about your badge." "Who is this?" Marcus demanded, keeping his tone calm but firm. "You'll know soon enough," the voice replied, a hint of amusement underlying the warning. "Be careful who you trust. Not everyone is an enemy, but not everyone is a friend either, especially in a city like this." The line went dead. Marcus stared at the phone, the weight of the warning settling in. His instincts told him that this was no ordinary observer. This was someone experienced, someone dangerous, someone who had intentionally inserted themselves into the night's events. He looked out the window, scanning the streets below. All seemed quiet, but his gut told him otherwise. Marcus knew the encounter with the officers was just the beginning. Someone had plans, and tonight he had become part of them, whether he liked it or not. He closed the blinds and turned back to his desk, but sleep wouldn't come. Not with the rain still dripping from the eaves, not with the image of the shadowed figure lingering in his mind, not with the knowledge that the city, soaked and shimmering, held dangers that didn't always announce themselves. As he leaned forward, reviewing his notes and preparing for the next day, his phone buzzed again. This time, a message appeared, encrypted and anonymous. "You can't hide behind the badge forever. Tonight was only a warning." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He knew this wasn't idle threat. Someone was moving, watching, waiting. And unlike the officers, they were patient, cunning, and fully aware of who he was. The night stretched on, the rain finally stopping, leaving the streets glistening under the streetlights. Marcus prepared himself for what was coming, knowing that the next move could change everything. And somewhere in the darkness, the figure watched, a silent predator with intentions that Marcus could only begin to guess. Marcus Reed had spent the night trying to make sense of the encrypted message. "You can't hide behind the badge forever. Tonight was only a warning." The words burned in his mind as he walked through the streets of Atlanta the next morning, the city now bright with sunlight reflecting off wet pavement. He had survived a harrowing encounter with officers just the night before, but the real danger, he realized, had only just begun. The previous confrontation had left him shaken. He wasn't naive. He understood the dangerous assumptions that had driven the officers' actions. Marcus knew all too well how racism and bias could escalate a simple stop into something life-threatening. The difference last night was that he had his badge, and for now, it had protected him. But the anonymous warning suggested someone far more calculated had been observing him, waiting for the right moment. He kept moving, weaving through the crowded sidewalks, eyes constantly scanning. Each passerby seemed normal, but Marcus had learned the hard way that danger didn't always announce itself. Please like and subscribe to this channel. Stay tuned for part 2.